we're telling our kids not to use these substances, not to use, not to drink, not to use marijuana, not to use drugs, but they have their hand on a hot stove and, and these substances make them feel better. Like they
Mhm.
take, it feels like they're taking their hand off that stove. So why wouldn't they use them? And I never really thought of it that way, right? Like, of course we're crazy. Like, they feel so much better when they're on them. Why would they not continue to use them? And I think that's calling it the problem is so God, that really did hit home.
Welcome to Spark Me, a podcast for women who know life is just getting interesting.
Each week, we spark great conversations, share lived experiences, real resources, and tap into the collective wisdom that comes from learning together.
If you're looking for connection, not perfection, fresh ideas, and a community where you truly belong,
Then pull up a chair. You're in the right place. Welcome to Spark Me.
well, Michele, welcome back to Spark Me. Super excited. I thought maybe we had such a phenomenal conversation with Brenda Zane of the
Mm,
Hope Stream community
yeah,
that I thought maybe we could do a little Spark short on it.
absolutely. I mean, it was so rich and deep and
Hmm.
meaningful. And she is so well spoken on the topic. I mean, obviously from personal experience, sadly from first personal experience, but in a way also a way to turn something that like turned her life upside down for so many years. 6 years, I think, was her journey with her son, starting when he was 13. Enzo, his name is, starting when he was 13 and until he was 6 years after that, 20 some. And like I know every moment of that journey had to be painful, just so painful. And I was just so uh, like elated at the end to know that her son is now working in recovery and helping other people.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, talk about hope, like not giving up hope,
Absolutely.
even after she almost lost him. And it took him years to even learn how to talk and use a phone, all those simple things again. But now he's doing great. So I think that conversation touched a lot of our listeners, Liz, just based on feedback that I've gotten. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately it's a topic that everyone, whether you're dealing with it directly or indirectly, everyone is dealing with it. We have an epidemic of mental health issues with kids in this country, and I thought it was really just very thoughtful when Brenda said that the substance abuse is it's a solution for the underlying problem, which
Hmm.
is really mental health issues
Yeah.
and helping kids to deal with some of the challenges that they're facing. They're just using drugs and alcohol as a way to cope, and I never framed it that way in my
Mm.
mind, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if we look at it that way, um, it's just no great surprise that we all know people who have kids that are facing this challenge.
Absolutely. And she was making that point over and over, when she talked about the tip of the iceberg and looking under it, that the drugs and alcohol are the tip, but underneath it, there's so much going on, right? Um, and the analogy she used that really resonated for me is like we're telling our kids not to use these substances, not to use, not to drink, not to use marijuana, not to use drugs, but they have their hand on a hot stove and and these substances make them feel better. Like they
Mhm.
take, it feels like they're taking their hand off that stove, so why wouldn't they use them? And I never really thought of it that way, right? Like, of course we're crazy. Like, they feel so much better when they're on them. Why would they not continue to use them? And I think that's calling it the problem is so uh, God, that really did hit home. Um, and what to do about the epidemic of mental health illnesses and issues in the country because I, I just feel like, especially with phones, with these cell phones, Liz, it's just going to keep getting worse.
I agree. I agree. We talked about it in a previous episode,
Yeah.
the impact of social media, and it really. I just think. I think refocusing kids, and this is very simplistic. So apologies in advance for this, but away from screens and towards something more productive
Hmm.
is it is just going to be incredibly important. And I am reading more and more that millennials and Gen Zers are moving more towards analog, which I think is a great first step. But
Yeah.
we need to, I mean, when she said her son started to have issues when he was 13, you could have knocked me over with a feather,
Yeah.
because I had no idea that it could start that young.
That young. And the other thing that I think was really powerful is like, everybody assumes, I think a lot of people assume, not everybody, a lot of people assume that trauma, is the capital T trauma. Like it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, um, emotional abuse, those kind of things. But that there's small T trauma can have just as much of an impact. And that's the bullying, the online bullying, like something happens at school, like things that parents have no control over, right?
Mhm.
That can really almost have some of the same effect on kids and cause those deeper, issues that they then later are trying to cover up or trying to like resolve a different way. Um, just everything she's so calm and cool and like the way she tells the stories and
Mhm.
what she went through, and you feel the horror of what she was going through, but she's telling it with such a steady voice, and she's so clearly so smart and was so successful in marketing that it's like you can almost see your I certainly could see myself in her, not, in terms of like how foreign it was to have a child, who was getting involved in substance use and not having a clue what to do about it, being so naive to it, like not, not
Right.
even kind of looking out for, because you don't think it's going to happen to you, right? Like, and and I have seen those juice boxes, those candy, the marijuana that looks like and I mean, it almost even has names, just like things that you would realize. Like it'll not quite be Oreos, it'll be
Mhm.
Oreos, you know what I mean? Like it'll be just close enough that it actually looks exactly like something that you've seen a million times and you wouldn't look twice at. You would just think it was something else. Just on and on. Everything she said, like that, you don't necessarily smell marijuana anymore, how potent it is. Liz, when I told people that my son was going to treatment because of marijuana use, I got a lot of side eyes, just like marijuana use, right?
Yeah.
And it was so hard to 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 have people understand, like, it's not the marijuana you're thinking about. It's not
Right.
that is not what marijuana is anymore. THC is so potent and so strong, and she just described it so well, and she was even at a conference about it. That's how big a deal it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's interesting because years ago, like, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that, I was, on a trip with, some friends, and one of my friends' college-age daughter was with us, and it was her spring break. We were out in Las Vegas, went to see a couple concerts. Anyway, um, some of her roommates were in Nashville, for spring break. That's where they chose to, and they were out at a club, and one of the roommates, went out to get some air, and some guy handed her a joint and said, do you want to, puff or whatever? And she said, sure. And it was laced with fentanyl. And she
Ugh.
ended up, in a, emergency room in an overdose situation. And you think to yourself, like, when I heard the story, you go back to your age when you were that age, and it was just a different world. You didn't have to worry about watching your
Yeah.
glass at a bar, so that somebody doesn't put in, a date rape drug or something into your alcoholic drink. I mean, and so it caused us to talk about this. And my friend's daughter said that, yeah, they only order bottled beer, not in a glass when they go to a bar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it like never would
Mm.
I think about these things.
Ugh, you just have to be so careful these days. And I think, even in college, there are drugs all over the place. Mushrooms here
Hmm.
and this there. But I just feel like the landscape's different, Liz, and like you said, fentanyl, and that's so scary. Fentanyl is like it's none of it's regulated, but like it is made in a lab, and you don't know where that's coming from, and you don't know if it's a
Hmm.
good strain or a bad strain, and like you're literally rolling the dice. Like the kids are, or anybody who's taking these drugs is rolling the dice on their lives. For some of these, I get that THC is causing the psychosis and everything, but like the next step, is sort of these
Hmm.
drugs that like it's not just psychosis, it's your life that is at risk, and they're so addictive. Um, it's very scary out there, and I hope that parents like who listened to the episode kind of had a better understanding, not just of what's out there, what the landscape is, what to look for, that even if you're struggling with kids who have mental health struggles, it's still really hard, right? It's the drug use almost doesn't even have to be there for you to be feeling the pain of a child who's going through something, or who's struggling in some way, whether it's depression or anxiety, or doesn't want to go to school for whatever reason. Those are hard things to deal with, and then you put substances on top of that as the way that they're trying to solve that issue for themselves, and it just compounds everything. Um, it's really it's tough out there, and the other thing I hope people heard, especially parents who are going through this, is you're not a bad parent.
Right.
That's
Right.
a really like a really important message. I really want those parents to hear, and it's something I have to remind myself of all the time, is like some of the best parents in the world are those who are trying to get their kids, you know, help them with these struggles, because this could happen to anyone, Liz. It's not, you know, I don't think anybody's immune from it. You think you are, but it could happen anytime. If you got your kids through high school, it doesn't mean you're free,
Right.
And to just like love them, keep connected to them, because even in the struggle, like that connection is so important. Just making sure that they still know they're loved is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when Brenda was talking about her son. Two things that struck me was, and you just mentioned the little T trauma. So, his trauma came from her divorce, right? So, so when she and her first husband got divorced, that's what sort of threw him. But her son was like, the kid that everybody loved. He was the great athlete, the student body president, the funny jokester. So you would not think that he had had any trauma. He was so good at hiding it
Hmm.
with this outward appearance of everything's great, I'm great, life is great. And yet underneath that, he was hurting incredibly.
Yeah.
And then eventually turned to, uh, drugs or alcohol to soothe that hurt. And so to your point, there, that's not about bad parenting. That's not about, growing up in a dysfunctional household or anything like that.
No.
That's just life threw you a curveball, and, and you just happen to take the wrong tools to try and solve that curveball.
Yeah. Well, like she said, her her child was ADHD, so a very black and white thinker,
Mhm.
right? Because how many parents out there have gone through divorce, right? A lot of kids make it through. Doesn't throw the world
Yeah,
upside
yeah.
down, right? But every child is different, you know? Every child
Mhm.
is different. It doesn't like you can't you can't predict you what's going to impact one person or one kid or another kid. Like it just, that just threw his world upside down. So um it's so I think like the the messages that she was sending just to to understand like that mental health is really
Mhm.
at the root of this, and that it's something that we like really need to acknowledge and accept, and when it happens, that's what you have to get to, right? That I think is a great takeaway, and it's so true. Like, I've shared, struggles with my son, and that 100% what it is, right? It's the things underneath, the things he went through as a child. The hard part is for me, and I think for a lot of parents, like I don't even know what he went through. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like I have
right.
13 years of his life that I have no background. I have little snippets of information. I have ideas maybe, but I don't know. I wasn't there, but I know the root cause is there, and but it's really hard to help. Like I didn't know what kind of therapy that he needed. I was getting him therapy. I didn't know what attachment was, right? Like there's just I learned
Mhm.
so much along the way. And what I heard Brenda say was like educate yourself too. Like if she had spent a little more time educating herself instead of like blaming herself, that would have been a better use of time at the very beginning. But you're in panic and you're in struggle, it's like you can hindsight anything really.
Yeah, now she talked about, and I didn't know that this existed, that there are companies out there that specialize in getting to know, your child and then pointing them in the right place for therapy or rehab or whatever it might be that they need. And I didn't know that that even existed.
Mhm.
And when she talked about it, it said to me, well, that industry exists because there's enough of a demand that that
Oh,
there are companies that there to, to deal with that demand. So,
oh,
I mean, have you had experience with these types of companies?
yeah, and she's right, it is the wild, wild west, right? So, at the very beginning, just got like somebody said this place, somebody said that place, like, um, so when things got really bad initially with my son, where there was just no more control over anything, um, it was like I really resonated with Brenda when she was saying like her one son was like, "Mom, are you stupid? Why are you letting him get away with all this stuff?" Because the same
Hmm.
thing was happening on my end. Like I was just letting things happen while I was planning stuff in the background, right?
Gotcha.
Planning the first intervention and treatment in the background. And so he ended up at a place called Caron. It's Caron in Pennsylvania, and it was like they do the typical. It's 28 days. It's not 30 days. 28-day program, and then they recommend continuing care. And they made the recommendation. They said here are places, and they're a very well known. A highly reputable place. So I trusted their recommendations, right? Um, but when my son went through, and I'm not gonna go through the whole story, but when he finally
Hmm.
left treatment on his own because he was 18 and he decided he didn't wanna be there anymore. And then eventually kind of he left and we weren't connected for a little while, and then we reconnected, um, and when I realized, like, he still needed help, but I you can't force your child, especially at
Yeah.
18, they're legal adults at that point. You can't force them to do anything.
Hmm.
I was listening to Hope Stream at that time, and there was a woman named Joanne Lilly who was a therapeutic consultant that, like, she mentioned, and I just talked to her. I'm like, "Okay, well, here's my situation." I have a son who's not necessarily, um open to these things, but then you find these moments of leverage, right? So, I think he got a DUI, and I'm like, that was a moment of leverage because he needed me, right? And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, here's what you're going to have to do. If I'm helping you with these things, then here's what you need to do. Um, and so but I didn't know what here's what you need to do would be. And so I was talking to a therapeutic consultant to say, what's out there? Like, what do you do when somebody is completely resistant to residential? What other kind of programs are there? What should I be considering? Like, and she was walking me through all the different, you know, different possibilities, different lengths. Like, this is an intensive versus a wilderness versus residential versus, and just helps break it down and gives you lists of, it's still a lot of work on your end. So you get a list of places that she's vetted first, and then you have to call them all and see if this a fit. Does this sound like something that would be good for my son? Da, 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 da. But it's not an easy road. But it definitely takes overwhelm to something into manageable chunks, if that makes sense, right? It takes the overwhelm of like everything out there, Google search and have no idea. Now you're talking to somebody who knows the world, who has heard your situation and who can make recommendations based on what she's heard. And then it's a lot. She still doesn't know your child like you do, right? So
Sure.
and is very open about that. But then that's why it's like, we'll call these places and see if you feel like it's a fit, for your child, and if you feel good about the place too. But it just helps to narrow down the completely wild landscape of treatment places, and types into something that you can. So it's a first round, right? Like, and at least you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're guided. And it's just like an admissions counselor for colleges, I guess. But, there's a lot more out there. A lot more. If somebody says a college to you, you could probably find out pretty quickly if it's good. But like, you could find out a lot about it. It's really
Right.
different in this landscape because all the parents are talking about it. Well, let me tell you, my kid went here. And they're all proud.
Mm-hmm.
They're so proud. They can't wait to tell you, right?
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
different in this world. Right? It's like the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really good. It's hard to find the good places because people aren't talking about it.
Well, and that's
Um,
probably why the Hope Stream community that Brenda
so great.
created was such an incredible resource,
Mm.
right?
When I went in there for the first time, it was like finding a home, right? Like, because suddenly, there are text threads and people greeting you, and like, you realize that you are not alone, right? That there are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people going through this, and some people going through a lot worse, sadly. And I found the adoption group, and I found a parent coach, and I got a lot of great resources, and I think it was the beginning of kind of making a difference for my son. He's going to be on a long journey, he's like,
Sure.
but he's, it's like the stock market journey. Like, it's going up and down, but
Yes.
it's going in
2
the right
steps
direction.
forward.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that is
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not it's not a Nvidia or like, it's
No.
working hard, this stock, so you're not getting a huge return right away, but hopefully over time it suddenly does, like the hockey stick. That's what I hope. If that's what happens, it'll be worth the ups and downs.
Well, I know that when we first sat down and talked about creating this podcast, you said, I have a story that I want and a guest that I want to interview.
Mhm.
And it was Brenda Zane.
Yep.
It was like the very first person you talked about.
Yep.
We even talked to Brenda about the mechanics of starting a podcast. She was incredibly generous with her
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so Brenda is a friend of Spark Me from day one, essentially.
Yeah. Well, because Liz, it's not just like her podcast, because her podcast is amazing and resource rich, and that's what we want this to be. But you and I have always talked about, like, the long game for Spark Me
Mm-hmm.
is very much like what the stream is for Brenda. So the stream is a place where you go in and there's all these groups of women and it is for women. It's like mothers who are in different phases of their kids experimenting, or like their kids are adopted, or their kids are whatever it is. Like, you find all of these groups, or sadly some whose kids have passed away, and they get to, they have a group and they can help other mothers, and there are all these different conversations and groups and learning tools and get-togethers, like real life get-togethers. And
Mhm.
when we first sat down and we talked about creating a community, and having people feel seen and heard and having places to have these discussions safely and openly, right? The podcast was sort of the vehicle to introduce people to what we hope will become a community where we can go online and like have conversations. Like you're interested in your health, you're interested in menopause, you're interested in your finances, you're interested in leadership, whatever it might be that we're covering, like that it's in there, and that we can eventually also meet up in person and have real
Mhm.
dialogues in person, like at that real table with that real glass of wine or whatever it is, like getting together, cup of coffee, getting together and sharing in person and form like not just online friendships, but in person friendships. Cause that's, I did that, I feel like I got that out of Brenda's community.
Yeah, and I think that truly is a focus for us. And I will say, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were both talking about social media and how social media has changed. It used to be rich with you were really connecting with your friends and staying in the loop on what was going on in their lives and things like that. And I'm not smart enough to know exactly what the algorithm change was at Meta or, any of the other social media platforms, but it's definitely changed and the connections are not rich. And while that is going on, I think people are craving
Mm-hmm.
in real life connection.
Yes.
I think that the digital, the digital connection has had its moment. It's never going to go away. We don't mean that, but it is limited. And I think we have all learned that it's limited and what those limitations can be. And we need to start to have in real life connection and conversation. And I think it's never been more important than it is today.
I couldn't agree more. That's why we're doing this, because that's one of the things we want to do. So, stay tuned because we're building this up, right? We're the little engine that could right now. And I
Mhm.
really love where Spark Me is going. I think we're starting to hear more and more that the conversations are touching people's lives. And we know how podcasts go. They're kind of that hockey stick as well.
Mhm.
But when we get this to a point where we have uh, we kind of have a community that we know is engaging with us all the time. And I think we're getting there, like a really loyal group of listeners. We'd love to just get together with them, and
Yes.
start to maybe go on a retreat and have a wellness weekend or do something fun, just even get together uh in our hometowns and get together over a cup of coffee or go on a trip or, you said you might want to do yoga. I'd love to go on a hike with a group of women and just have these great conversations and awesome new friendships, because we have a lot in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, I think that probably is a great way to wrap up this
Yeah.
Spark Short. Brenda Zane was a phenomenal guest. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for introducing
Yeah.
us to her.
She's
Thank
great.
you for being so honest about your own story. It's it's real. It's real life, and so many people are going through it. And I know that they will be touched and helped, frankly, by hearing Brenda's story, your story, and finding the Hope Stream community.
Absolutely. If you're going through it, please reach out to Brenda's site. There's so much there. It's so rich in resources, and just know you're not alone. You're not alone.